Should agencies really downgrade U.S. Treasuries? And if they do, what would be the implications for the market? Well, joining us now, Peter Morici, University of Maryland Robert H. Smith School of Business professor. Sorry, bit of a tongue twister there. And former chief economist for U.S. International Trade Commission. And also Rodney Anderson, author of Credit 911. Peter and Rodney, good to have you on the show. Peter, when Moody's was making that warning, I don't think it was suggesting it was going to downgrade all the way down to junk. It was just that it could lose AAA. Why do you think that they should be going all the way down to junk?
Well, let's look at the finances of the country. We're facing a $1.5 trillion deficit. A lot of these tax benefits in the tax bill weren't anticipated. They were beyond sustaining the Bush tax cuts to additional tax breaks, additional tax cuts, some of which are going to be difficult to repeal. For example, the Social Security temporary tax reduction of 1/3. It's going to be very difficult not to extend that after 2 years because that's the principal break that middle-income folks get. That makes our Social Security system insolvent. These kinds of deficits, an insolvent pension system, sounds like Greece to me.
Do you think we're as junk-worthy as Peter's suggesting, Rodney?
No, I don't think so. Here's what happens. Would you send your kids to a subprime school? Would you order a subprime steak? Our country is not a subprime country. And I think what's going to happen is China...
Even despite all this reason...
Absolutely. China is not going to cut off their number one customer, the U.S. That'd be like the top heroin dealer in the world.
It might threaten it, but we can't afford
cutting off, but they're not going to. But what's going to happen is the credit infrastructure of our country needs to be changed. Congress and people are pumping money, but what they're not doing is they're not fixing the credit system that's out there. Once they fix the credit system, then we will see our great country come back and we will see the deficits start falling.
Is it that simple, though, Peter? Sounds a little too simple to me.
Well, we certainly do need to fix our credit system. We need to get those middle-range banks in a position where they can lend money to businesses again. That's important, and I acknowledge that. But we'd have a prosperity that's based too much on borrowing because our trade deficit is going to start growing again if we start basically getting credit to expand. We're going to have to fix the trade deficit so we can bring down our budget deficit without tanking the economy.
How do we do that? How do we just fix our trade deficit?
If China won't revalue its currency, then we're going to have to simulate a revaluation for them by essentially taxing dollar-yuan conversion or intervention in the markets, as Bergson has suggested. You know, economists of all stripes, liberal, conservative, in the middle, including Ben Bernanke, have identified this currency problem. The president has said there are things that we can do, but he said that to the Chinese premier when they were at the UN in the fall, but he's failed to act. And that's what needs to be done.
Rodney, do you think that's a good preventative to stop a downgrade?
I think it's partially the answer, but here's what happens. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal the last 2 weeks have talked about a bill in Congress. It's called the Medical Debt Relief Act. And what this does is over 50% of people on their personal credit reports are dealing with medical collections. Mm-hmm. And this bill moves up the waiting period from 7 years to 45 days. What this bill does is this bill starts housing. This bill starts jobs. And best of all, this bill, if people start researching it, it costs the American taxpayer not one penny.
Let me ask you one question before I get back to Peter. Peter thinks that we should be downgraded to junk. Do you think that we should be downgraded, even if it's only one notch?
No. And the reason being, we're different from Ireland, we're different from Spain, we're different from the other countries. And the reason being is the world needs a U.S. consumer. We need our money. And so I don't think Moody's will ever downgrade us to junk.
We are the reserve currency right now, but gradually, as the U.S. dollar might potentially lose its value, don't you think that gradually we lose confidence in the U.S. dollar, we lose confidence in fiat systems? Isn't that what the rise in gold is all about, Peter?
Well, I think that is what it's about. That's why people are fleeing to gold. And my feeling is we don't have to lose our reserve currency status as much as investors need to just start demanding more for our debt, a higher interest rate than we normally expect to accompany a recovery in the business cycle. In that context, then the debt that was issued this year and last year, 20 and 30-year bonds, are going to take a much bigger value hit than they would over the normal course because of the cycle, and they won't ever really recover to where they were during the recession, when interest rates come back down. In that context, long treasuries are a bad investment right now. They entail a real capital risk that's not cyclical in nature, and my feeling is that it's very foolish to buy out on the yield curve with regard to U.S. or municipal or state debt.
What do you think of long-term treasuries as an investment?
I think it's very troublesome what's going on, but I don't think rates are going to go up as everybody predicts, as high as everybody predicts, too quick, too fast. I think we're going to see where U.S. treasuries maintain in a certain area between maybe a 3% and 4% yield over the next 1 to 2 years.
Why?
Why? I think because what's happening is the economy is still contracting to a certain point. Once we turn around, like I said, we make some infrastructural changes within the credit system, it will allow interest rates to start moving higher. It will generate some inflation in our country. But for right now, we don't have that. This whole rally that I see in the current stock market is nothing more than the refinance rally of a consumer making a small comeback because of refinancing their homes.
Peter, you want to have the last word? And my question also to you is, how much higher do you see yields going on the longer end of the curve?
Oh, I think on the longer end of the curve, we could get above 5 or 6% without much problem, and then they would stay there. They wouldn't come down as much as we would like when the economy slows again and we go into another cycle. My feeling is that we are going to see the real spread between the rate of inflation and nominal interest rates widen, and it's going to stay there simply because there's more risk in financing the U.S. government than there has been in the past.
Peter and Rodney, great debate. Thank you so much for joining us today.